But are we I'm not even doing the bit now.
I think the solution to male loneliness might just be like legislating in the same supermajority with your bros, because last night there were so many retirements, and then at the press conference afterward, people were like so sappy and like
they
all
were
of
getting
these
vulnerable.
men were like so genuinely being friends with each other and sad that their buddies were leaving.
So you're saying if we just let a large group of men have almost complete power for a couple decades,
believe it or not,
it
builds
it makes them
camaraderie.
feel better.
Yeah.
Okay, well then, that's something.
But that picture, so they let Faison do the adjournment in the House, and he did that part, and then you have to do this like specifically worded thing to put all the actions of the whole session into the journal and make it official. And Sexton like teed it up for Faison to do that last night. Faison didn't have like a document or anything, or there was no plan for Faison to have done this apparently. So he says some informal version of it, and Sexton's like, cool, that's not gonna work.
Like, yeah.
And then Faison had been tearing up and was having a hard time even saying the adjournment prior to that. So then when they did give it to him in writing, which is, I believe, Lamberth's laptop that he's holding, where they looked it up and gave it to him. And this is like several minute process now. He kept trying to read it and kept fumbling. And it was like deeply funny, which made it harder,
Yeah.
And then when Sexton was doing his
there.
part right after that, he then also bungled it. So it was like multiple minutes of them laughing and crying and trying to figure out how to end the session.
Like I'm imagining like every rehearsal dinner I've been to where like
that's
you're on
exactly
the
what it
eighth
felt
toast,
like.
and it's kind of like we all love each other, but if you're an outsider, this is insane. What's up, everyone? I'm Stephen Hale from the Nashville Banner, and I'm joined by Sine Die Sarah Grace Taylor.
How's it going?
How's it going with you?
Great.
You've barely slept. The legislature adjourned at
8:30ish last night.
Okay, and then you filed this very long story, which I have in front of me, recapping the entire session. But also, I believe last time we did this, you said you would never do this again. But here we are. So you can't escape the pod.
Oh, I said I wouldn't do this again?
You said you wouldn't do this again.
I think I only said I wouldn't do it again if you brought up chemtrails.
Well, we're only just beginning our journey together. When the session ends, I always kind of think of that scene from Burn After Reading at the very end where they're just like, so what did we learn? And the other guy's like, I guess just don't do it again. I don't know. It's always a little bit like a whirlwind, and trying to wrap it up is a bit insane. But you've done that. And we were also talking a little bit before we got in here about the sort of vibes of the end of the session being kind of like last week of high school. So tell me about that. What's the vibe like up there?
You could tell a couple of weeks ago that it was the end, not just of this year, but of the 2-year session, which means people are going to retire. Some people won't get reelected. Like, there is a real senioritis feeling, particularly with some more senior members leaving this year. They were making jokes at Faison's expense in several of his last committees, and there was like a lot of joshing around among Republicans. But then also this week there were like really high tensions, and people were dropping the F-bomb on the floor and fighting with each other and making bald jokes in pretty contentious debate. So
I mean, so like I was saying, last week of high school.
Yeah.
There
was a substitute teacher the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it always feels like there, and it's been a while since I was up at the Hill for this, but on those last few days, we're like, these sessions are marathon sessions. They're getting a little slap happy, but they're also discussing very serious things. So tensions are running high, but also then some of them are leaving after 20 years. They've been at kind of like sleepaway camp for a few months. It's an interesting dynamic. How are you feeling personally? Where are you at? Let's do a quick check-in with you, and then we'll move on to the substance of your reporting. But you've stepped out of the whirlwind too.
I'm just excited to clear my inbox. I genuinely don't think I've cleared my inbox since like January at this point. And I'm not going to tell you how many digits are in the number of unread emails I have.
Yeah, are you inbox zero person? Like, is that your goal? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm like itchy, which
Got
has
it.
like been true for the last 3 months. So
Well, We'll run through this and give you a break. Okay, so you have a
I
line.
want you to clarify. Are you not inbox zero? And what's the alternative?
Well, I think it depends what you mean by inbox zero.
Nope.
My
number.
inbox is not empty, but I don't have any unread emails.
Well, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well,
yeah,
some
like
people
I
are
want to
like,
read all my.
some people are like, I do not leave a notification. This is also why I forget to respond to texts and emails. I should leave them because some people, or who are smarter, will be like, oh yeah, if I know I can't respond right now, I leave it unread so that the notification reminds me to go back to it. What I do is the notification comes in and I get very excited and I read it, clear out the notification, and then forget it ever happened. So you have a line in your story, kind of up top of the story where you're kind of summing up the legislative session. You say, the final bill in the way of adjournment, a somewhat watered-down effort by the state to assert control over the Memphis and Nashville electric services, was in many ways a microcosm of the session. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? We can talk about what that bill was too, but kind of why that was the session in miniature to you.
Yeah, so that had at least two kind of major themes to it. One, which I wrote about, is this theme of Republican lawmakers this session really tried to get greater control of local governments. Some of it was really broad, like mandating participation in 287G, which affects everybody. Some of it was really pointed at Democratic cities like Nashville and Memphis. The Memphis school takeover is a really big one. These utility board and airport authority bills that passed late in the session. And this utility one specifically was the last thing in conference committee yesterday, which is the other theme. There's kind of like a procedural lack of transparency on the Hill the whole time, all the time. It's something that seems kind of a natural consequence of that big of a supermajority. Yesterday, there were 26 conference committees. I think last year there were 2.
So let me pause you right here for anyone who's just tuning in here. A conference committee is what? Break down what a conference committee is.
When a bill passes in the House and a bill passes in the Senate, but maybe one version's amended, so they don't match. The other house or the other chamber can match that version, or if they don't agree, at the very end of session, there are these ad hoc committees called conference committees where a team of senators and a team of representatives who are appointed on the spot meet, air quote, to go discuss if they can negotiate a compromise on this bill or if they're going to kill it last minute, right? 26 of these yesterday is why it went on for 10 hours. 2 of those took place in a meeting room and were broadcast. The other ones, we understand, they weren't even like huddling at a desk, but staffers were like bringing pre-signed agreements to people and they were just like signing off. So 24-ish bills yesterday passed without regular public discussion in a legislature where a lot of that discussion already happens behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm. Because of them having the majorities they have anyway. And so just to kind of put a fine point on this, like, because as far as I can tell, this happens in a lot of ways towards the end of the session, where they're trying to get done. A lot of things speed up, so they will get rid of some of the rules. Did we have the flow motion? Did the flow motion happen this week?
We were in a modified flow motion, I think, the last 3 weeks. It was longer than last year.
And the flow-mo is just, basically they get rid of some of the speed humps that would otherwise slow down the process, and helps them move bills along quicker. The conference committees, like you're saying, so all of a sudden at the end of the session, after there's been all this public deliberation, or mostly public deliberation, all of a sudden bills can just start changing and being passed very quickly without someone like you or God love them, a member of the public trying to follow it at home, being able to really keep up with it.
Well, and that's true. Plus, this year, there were a lot of 11th hour substantive amendments to bills. There were a couple, I wrote about one that was snuck in that would have added the failed challenge to Plyler v. Doe to the voucher bill, which is unrelated. That one ended up failing.
And Plyler, that's the case about children being entitled to education regardless of their immigration status?
Correct. And the original bill around that died, but they tried to sneak some version of it into this voucher expansion. And then after that didn't really go through, the next voucher bill they had, our colleague Lillian wrote about an amendment that would have effectively made, again, these metro areas accept potentially unlimited voucher students under the ESA, the old voucher program that only applies to these larger counties. So there was a lot of this like last minute change or attempts at last minute change, and a lot of it happening not on the floor, which makes it even harder than usual to cover or
Right.
to understand if you're a member of the public.
Right. And also then to explain for someone in your position, to explain how it ended up the way it ends up, because in a lot of these cases you don't even see the discussion where that's debated. At least if it's being debated on the floor, you can go, okay, this person argued this person argued this, they ended up doing this. Everyone can see what happened.
Well, and not to be cynical, but a lot.
Oh no, we wouldn't do that.
A lot of the discussion on the floor already, just on a normal day in this particular legislature, clearly is predetermined, and there are like questions that will be asked in a committee that are like queued up by the sponsor to answer what they want to answer. Like, so it doesn't start off great, and it definitely devolved by the end of this session.
Got it. We've talked a lot about immigration-related bills. You've written a lot about them. So I don't know if we need to recover too much of that ground, but also I know that was one of the very big things that was going on there this year. Is there anything like in the final week that you think is worth us really highlighting? You mentioned the Plyer debate about that case and that precedent and where it was going to apply and things. Is there anything in there that
I mean, the Plyler thing didn't go through. There's no version of the Plyler bill that passed. There are other tracking bills that did pass, particularly tracking around people using public services. So that is really broad and covers most anything that you could receive from your local government. And it also requires that these government employees would report anyone who can't prove their status to the new Central Immigration Enforcement Office. And then threatens those employees with a Class A misdemeanor, which includes jail time. It's the most serious misdemeanor charge if they don't comply. So there's some pretty serious tracking in there, but not at schools. Otherwise, a lot of it was targeted at drivers. So it's not legal for you to drive in the state of Tennessee if you are undocumented or not legally present. And then there's stuff targeting commercial driver's licenses, non-English driver's license testing. A lot of that's covered in that story.
Yeah. There were a number of bills, I guess, broadly, we'd say, related to the LGBTQ community and people in our state, trans folks, and also bills about, pride, displays of pride. Maybe we can start by you explaining to us why people may be seeing the term Nuclear Family Month on social media so much this week.
So there's a representative, Gino Bolso, who introduced quite a bit of anti-LGBTQ bills this year, not really out of character for him. One of them was the No Pride Flag or Month bill, which is exactly what it sounds like, which is to say that Tennessee's not going to recognize Pride Month, and you can't have any symbols of pride on any state property. That failed. I think there's a lot of First Amendment concern around it, plus the obvious human rights stuff. And so the bill didn't make it through, but then Governor Bill Lee signed an order or a declaration last week, I think, saying that we're going to recognize June, which everyone knows nationally is Pride Month, as Nuclear Family Month, which is to celebrate heteronormative families from like the mid-50s.
I know there was also a lot of discussion about, you mentioned tracking as it relates to immigrants, but there was discussion of tracking as it relates to transgender Tennesseans, and specifically as it relates to their health care and when and where they get it.
Right.
Where do we land on that?
A bill passed that will require healthcare providers to share in aggregate, so not like John Smith's information with John Smith's name attached, but a total number of what they would call gender affirming care, what the state is calling transitional or detransitional care. Yeah. So they're just going to try to get some aggregate number of how much people are seeking gender affirming care, which is an interesting line because a lot of cis people also seek the same hormonal treatments for different things.
Well,
they get cosmetic surgeries. Like,
it gets into how you define that.
Right.
You end right back up at the same argument, right?
Yeah, of course. And so there were privacy concerns around that bill. There still are. At the last minute, it was amended where they took out the county information, which helps kind of not narrowed down. If there's one person in a rural county who's trans, we're not going to dox them and put this online. But the biggest problem with the bill, according to its opponents, is it's a public database. So they're going to like put this out there, which is kind of unprecedented to my knowledge with any kind of medical information.
Yeah. But that is going to happen in that form. You're saying that
it passed. I don't know if the governor signed it, but it passed both chambers. Yeah.
Well, and maybe as a side note, we should say, I mean, maybe the governor has signed some bills already.
He signed like one rash of them a week ago, but most of the stuff we're going to talk about, he hasn't necessarily signed.
And of course, the options available to him are to sign it, to veto it, or my favorite, he can let things go into law without his signature, which is a sort of middle ground of like washing your hands of it, but not rejecting it.
Yeah, it's just him not blessing it, but it doesn't make a material difference.
Yeah.
And he's only ever vetoed one bill. So it's unlikely
that any of this would go. Of these coming back.
Yeah. Lawsuits could arise for several of these bills, so it's not to say that they'll necessarily go into effect when they want them to. Mm-hmm. But theoretically, not acted upon by an outside force, all of these are going to be law.
You have a section in your recap story titled Other. And some of these are serious issues, but there also can be a little more, it's more of a grab bag, a little more fun to talk about. Is there anything in the other category that you find particularly interesting? I've got a few, but feel free to
you
grab
should drive. What do you want to talk
drive?
about?
Well, you and I have talked a lot about AI and robots over the course of the session.
Yeah.
Where did we land on some of these?
That's a good question. There's actually a really interesting discussion about AI yesterday. I didn't write about this bill, but there were a couple of different AI protection bills, which are things to protect kids from being bullied and coercive interactions with AI and that kind of thing. And it looked like the AI protection bill was going to fail yesterday. And Representative Zachary, who was carrying one of these, came to the House floor very mad at his Senate colleagues for not supporting his version of the bill, said that they were claiming that the Trump administration wanted to federally regulate AI, so the state shouldn't do it. Zachary said, I've talked to the Trump administration. They're lying. That didn't happen. It created a big fight between Zachary and Senator Yeager that was still, they were both on the stage at the press conference where Republican leadership was at the end of the session, and they were asked about their fight, and they did not say that there was goodwill between them when they were asked about it. But it was who's Trumpier and who has a closer connection to the White House, and is one of them lying. Zachary said that Amazon and other tech leaders had been lobbying directly at the 7th floor, which is the governor's office.
Mm-hmm. Against the regulation?
Yeah, against the regulation. And so he was saying basically that the Senate had chosen to trust the lobbyists and was claiming it was the White House. And then lo and behold, it passed. So it was kind of an interesting AI blip. But then there was a lot of, I would say they tried to regulate AI, the ephemeral robots, but they were pretty lenient to the physical robots. Specifically, I'm thinking of the delivery robots.
Yes, you wrote about the delivery robots.
By the way, genuinely, on the way here, I was behind a Waymo that was straddling into the bike lane. And I tried to take a picture of it to show you because I have openly told you how much I hate Waymo. And I have a picture of my steering wheel to show you later because I missed.
See, this is the kind of behavior they inspire on the streets. Yeah, so, and I know we don't have to get too deep into it, but I know I watched some committee discussions of some AI bills, and I mean, that's gonna be a theme for the next few years, one assumes, because to what you were saying, there's not, as of right now, any overarching federal regulation of this really, and so states are doing their own things. Maybe that will change, I don't know, but it's gonna keep being a topic of discussion, I imagine.
Well, until the robots are the legislators.
Sure.
Yeah.
At which point there will be more transparency because all their discussions about bills will just be downloaded into the chips in our brains. So that'll be fine. What about, did you find this bill about prediction markets interesting? Because I was very interested in this.
So we're on to things that I think are dystopian section.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much the whole other section is that almost. Just real quick, I guess as a point of personal privilege, because I just was interested in this the whole time, but there's a bill that passed, which, if people aren't familiar, these prediction markets, Kalshi, Poly Market, where you can, I hesitate to say bet because there's a lot of argument over the industry they don't want to call it betting because they don't want it to be treated like gambling. But you can wager, you can place money. It's almost like a stock market situation where
It's
you can
betting.
buy shares in and place a bet on the outcome of events. Some of them are sports, like your typical sports betting, but some of them are we going to have a ceasefire with Iran by next week?
Or as Wired reported this morning, there was a guy involved in the military raid and
yes,
who bet on the military raid itself.
And this gets right to what this bill was about, which is that the bill that did pass makes it a felony to engage in conduct intended to influence the outcome of an event when you've placed a wager on the outcome of that event on one of these prediction markets. And an example of how this could play out actually just happened to me and us at the Banner. I was talking to one of our colleagues about this yesterday. So referencing the Waymo story, there is a poly market, I guess they call them markets. There's a market for betting on which cities will have Waymo officially launched in them by June, 1st or 30th. I forget the date. And there's a bunch of cities. Nashville's one of them. And a few months ago when the news broke that that the police department here was getting some training from Waymo about the Waymos, it spiked because that's when we all kind of found out, oh, wow, that's about to happen soon. Well, the morning our story this week published about Waymo, the odds of that on this market jumped 12%. Because the actual wager is not on when will they be on the streets, but when will they be fully launched. Like right now, you still have to get an invitation code from Waymo to get them. But when will just anyone be able to download the app and do it? So, maybe people aren't as online as us and seeing the discussion about this, but like how this could work is like we quite easily could have bought some shares, made a bet on this, published our story on the safe assumption that any attention for Waymo is going to affect it, and then made some amount of money. I mean, it's depending on how much you bet, obviously, but it's kind of crazy.
Hale, are you admitting to a crime?
I did not do this. I've already told my editors that I did not do this. But this is all to say that what I just described is what this bill would make illegal.
Well, and I think we'll see more regulation on this, even though Tennessee is not like known for wanting to regulate that kind of thing. Because it has negatively affected the budget. So we get a lot of money from the lottery, which was just legalized in Tennessee a couple decades ago, and on sports books. And the state basically spent a lot of this year's budget deliberation saying, hey, guess what? The gambling's all happening on an app in your phone. We're not seeing any of that revenue. Right. How do we figure out a way for the state to make money off of it? Because right now they're losing money hand over fist because no one does the lottery anymore. And you're saying
the lottery seems quaint now. I mean, like,
but the lottery fund covers scholarships and a lot of educational stuff in the state, and it's creating an actual budget problem. So I think you'll see more like how does Polymarket, more than just some people think it's dystopian, it's going to be how do we either find a way for the state to profit off of that, or are they going to ban it and try to compete with it? I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah, that is very interesting, and probably as fine a place as any for us to leave it, unless you have any more lingering thoughts. We were joking about how you have the most like sort of coherent memory of everything that happened in the session right now, and as the hours go by, it will be fading because you're sleep deprived and you've been working really hard for several months now. So is there anything else top of mind for you about what you just experienced?
I don't think I ever called myself coherent.
Fair. Okay. I was saying that I think you're coherent.
No, I mean, I think those are the broad strokes. There was a lot of education change, voucher expansion.
Yes.
Of course, adding 15,000
to the... You and Lillian have written about multiple times, yeah.
Adding 15,000 to the 20,000 vouchers that were just passed last year is what the governor is going to call the biggest accomplishment and what the Republicans are very proud of, and is one of the biggest budget investments this year. There was not a lot of change on affordability, which is what the Democrats wanted to talk about last night. Some of these practical issues like roads and your cost of groceries are the kinds of things that they wanted to address and couldn't get through.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming in this morning to chat with us about it, and we'll just do this again next year.
I don't know.
So we are a production of the Nashville Banner. We are typically produced by Andrea Tudhope. Today, Steve Harouche is with us on the ones and twos, and we will talk to you again soon.